Hello, my name is Kurt and you are watching Anime Basic. Back in August 2021, I did a video on FLCL, an anime I had never seen before at the time, but one that I had always meant to get around to. I did an episode by episode breakdown as I watched each episode and gave my thoughts. I always thought I would enjoy it, but I ended up enjoying it way more than I ever thought I would. The animation and art style were charming. The unique manga-styled scenes were creative. And the music? Oh man, the music was my favorite part. Now years ago, long before I ever watched the original FLCL series, I remember seeing a trailer for FLCL Progressive and FLCL Alternative, and at the time, reception seemed positive. After all, it almost seems like a shame to have an amazing 6-episode anime from the early 2000s just, well, stay that. Now I say at the time because not long after both new series came out, the reception turned from mostly positive to lukewarm. I don't know how many people would agree with me, but I personally think something being bad is almost better than it being mediocre, because at least you can make fun of something overwhelmingly bad, whereas something mediocre usually just fades away, barely leaving anything of substance behind. The question is, what do people think of Progressive and Alternative now? As much as I didn't want other people's opinions to sway me before I watched them, I was curious, and couldn't help myself from looking. The overall consensus seems to have strayed from them being mediocre to being outright bad, which is interesting to me. I don't know if this is true, but it feels like a case of the people hating them still being bitter to this day and leaving negative comments, while the people who liked them just let them leave their thoughts. But I'm going to try and enter these series with a fresh mind. I'm always willing to give things the benefit of the doubt. I mean, after all, I like most of the live-action Resident Evil movies. So just like the original FLCL, I'm going to go through FLCL Progressive episode by episode, giving my thoughts, and then at the end, I'll give my thoughts on the series overall. I'll also be doing this for Alternative in the next video, and eventually I plan on doing these videos for FLCL Grunge and FLCL Shoegaze as well. There's also going to be a ton of spoilers, so that's your warning if you're planning on ever watching this. Ready? I am. I had to make sure I was watching the right episode, as the start of the series threw me for a loop. It was also surprisingly violent. The girl who ends up being the main character for the series was missing her hands and had bits of flesh falling off her. I was so confused as to what was happening. It ended up just getting explained away as a dream, but I was confused as hell for a while, especially when she turned into a dope-looking mecha. The main character's mother offers her breakfast and is maybe the first mother in history to take no for an answer. By the way, from here on, I'm going to refer to the main character by her name, which is Hidomi. I disliked the character of Ide from the very beginning. He's a typical high schooler bragging about things that obviously didn't happen. The class's teacher sounds so done with life. The voice actor sounds suspiciously like Kari Walgren, who voices Haruko. I guessed that she was impersonating their teacher, and I was right. And on that note, was Haruko as the teacher showing students porn? Haruko's weird and had sexual tendencies in the first FLCL series, but I feel like showing minors porn is a step too far. And apparently all the old men love Hidomi's tsundere personality, even though she's fucking 14. In this episode, the iron-shaped plant near town is apparently the same as the other one. So I'm confused as to if this is the same town from the original FLCL or not. Except for the iron-shaped buildings, there wasn't really anything in episode 1 that made this feel like FLCL. That is, until Hidomi gets hit by a car, just like Naoto was hit by a bike in the original Fooly Cooly. The background music doesn't sound like the Pillows, at least not the stuff they made for the original Fooly Cooly. Right now it seems decent, but it still lacks that distinct personality Fooly Cooly Season 1 soundtrack had. Hidomi gets attacked by a random monster, and as soon as I saw that thing, I thought something was gonna pop out of her forehead. But it turned out that the monster came from Ide's head, and he gets introduced into the fight by being thrown like a spear, which I admit got a big smile out of me. A blonde woman is introduced with a self-driving car and a sick-ass guitar. Her name is Jinyu, and she's my favourite character in Fooly Cooly Progressive. My final note for episode 1 is that I appreciate Fooly Cooly songs being used, but they almost don't really fit where the creators have used them. Fooly Cooly Progressive doesn't have much personality by the start of episode 2, but at least it continues the Fooly Cooly tradition of me not knowing what the fuck is happening. Like, why am I being shown a weird zombie student film? It ends up being another dream, but does Hidomi always have gory dreams about the end of the world? And when did they start? I am glad to see Haruko again, but why does she have orange hair instead of pink? Later on in the episode, this is kind of explained, but not really. In the beginning of episode 2, it seems like Haruko is trying to turn the class into a cult, but this is never really shown again in the later episodes. And, okay, either Haruko has implanted a ton of memories into the students, or a huge amount of time has passed between episode 1 and episode 2 of Fooly Cooly Progressive. I'm leaning towards the latter because the students have a yearbook full of photos, but it's also absolutely in Haruko's nature to fuck with a class full of students with fake evidence for fake memories. When Hidomi witnesses Ide being whipped and beaten, she gets overexcited. Is she a sadist? By the way, my favourite character Jinyu? Well, Jinyu's car turns into a mecha. I believe in Jinyu's superiority. Jinyu mentions that she and Haruko are the same person. I noticed that Jinyu's car and Haruko's Vespa have the exact same license plate, so maybe both them and their vehicles are the same person split in half? This also kind of explains Haruko's hair being a different colour, but white and orange don't really make pink? You're gonna hear me say I'm confused a lot in all of my Fooly Cooly videos, but once again I got confused. Hidomi just turns into a tiny little junk robot for some reason. It looks funny, but why? There was no real explanation for it, and she ends up reverting back to human anyway. And my final note for episode 2, and kind of Fooly Cooly Progressive as a whole, is this. Compared to the original Fooly Cooly, the art style in Progressive seems flat, bland. They don't really do anything interesting to it until way later. Once again, Hidomi gets hurt at the beginning of this episode as well. She's also awfully chipper for some reason. She talks about being eaten as if she wants it. Definitely a sadist. Did you guys want a requisite beach episode? Well, episode 3 has you covered. Once again, this does get explained at the end of the series, but I was very confused as to what Haruko wants by episode 3. She definitely seems more like the main antagonist in Progressive. A character is shown with an emotional support plant. Is that a thing? It feels dumb, but also something some people might have nowadays. The girl with the emotional support plant ends up getting revealed as a rent-a-girlfriend the poor blonde dude hires. Haruko copping a volleyball to the face is my favourite thing in this show so far. But once again, they use Fooly Cooly music where it doesn't really fit. It's revealed that everyone is on a class trip, but like, only 4 students are attending? Plus 1 extra? Like, it doesn't make sense for Jinyu to be on this trip, even if she is my favourite character. And there's also an abandoned factory right on the beach. This whole thing is a mess, bruh. So apparently, when characters get sexually flustered, they overflow and summon monsters. Now, episode 3 is when I started to think that the old man shown throughout the series might be a secret agent. This does get confirmed later. And just when I thought Jinyu couldn't get any cooler, her car can fly now. Jinyu is the best. I enjoyed the song that played during the fight towards the climax, but most of the time, instead of using the Pillow soundtrack where it belongs, which is during fight scenes, they just use generic rock music. And for my final note on episode 3, I enjoy Haruko as a character, but at this point in Progressive, I really dislike her. So Hidomi seems super chipper at the start of episode 4. It's apparently because her headphones drilled into her head at the end of episode 3, and now they won't come off. Though I gotta say, it's very strange to see Hidomi not act like a tsundere. The scenes of Kanti crucified on the cross reminds me of Lilith from Evangelion, though I'm sure it's 100% intentional. After all, Fully Coolly Progressive is made by Production IG, who worked on Neon Genesis Evangelion Death and Rebirth and the end of Evangelion with Gainax. Gainax and Production IG also worked together on the original Fully Coolly series. Medical Mechanica is continuously mentioned in episode 4, but at this point I still had no idea what that was. You don't even find out until episode 5. My theory was that it was Haruko's homeworld, but that gets debunked. So towards the end of episode 4, it's revealed that Hidomi's father left her and her mother, and she knows that her mother is crushed. That's why she started wearing her headphones, so she wouldn't hear her parents arguing or her mother crying. The fight scene between Jinyu and Haruko was amazing. I have to admit, I never thought I would see them going at it. And oh man, Fully Coolly Progressive has way more characters with stuff coming out of their heads than the original Fully Coolly series. Fully Coolly Progressive doesn't really feel like Fully Coolly, except for the recurring characters, but at least Progressive continues the tradition of the phrase Fully Coolly not really meaning anything. The fight scenes and visuals in episode 4 probably make it my favorite episode in Progressive, though episode 5 is a close second. And finally, the pillows are actually used very well in this episode. Episode 5 begins with the animation being done in a realistic charcoal art style, and it looks absolutely amazing. The episode then transitions to a watercolor style, and remains that way for most of the episode. I knew the cool art styles couldn't last forever, but I'm glad that they lasted for most of episode 5. The sketch style looks really pretty and suits the show a lot. This episode actually makes me want one of these new Fully Coolly series to have a different art style for each episode. I think that would be really cool. They also did an animatic manga style segment in this episode, just like in the original Fully Coolly. It's not as complex, but it's still nice to see. I think I enjoy the second half of Progressive a lot more than the first half. So, Jinyu merges back with Haruko at the end of episode 4. And man, you really feel the absence of her character in episode 5. I was already missing her. I was super confused when Haruko shows up in episode 5 looking pregnant, but apparently this is the result of her absorbing Jinyu back. And by absorbing, I mean eating her. So that's just her belly being full of Jinyu. Gross. I mentioned in the first episode that I disliked Ide, but he slowly ends up being more likable throughout Progressive. I mean, he even stands up to Haruko in episode 5. He looks like he gets destroyed when he gets sucked into Hidomi's head, but then later on he just gets blown up into the sky. Still doesn't die though. I'm still unsure as to what the red-haired guy and the old man are. I found out that the red-haired guy is the son of the commander from the original Fooly Cooly. You know, the one with massive eyebrows. And since he worked for the Bureau of Interstellar Immigration, I'm just gonna assume that his son does as well. And the old man. It was in episode 5 that I figured out that the iron-shaped factory is in fact Medical Mechanica. And in this episode, we get to see a mecha made out of the town amusement park. I guess it's done by the government? But this amusement park robot has been made specifically to attack Medical Mechanica. Though we don't get much of a fight as the amusement park mecha is just instantly vaporized. The end of the episode has Hidomi looking like she's going to fucking kill Haruko. And for my final note on episode 5, I love Kanti Dog. I would love a Kanti Dog figure. The final episode of Fooly Cooly Progressive. I was wondering if they would nail the landing or fizzle out, because it really could have gone either way. The episode begins with Medical Mechanica causing some major carnage. Haruko's boyfriend, who she has been trying to get to since the original Fooly Cooly, is named Atomisk, and he basically spends episode 6 of Progressive committing genocide. Though Haruko's efforts are in vain, as she gets rejected by Atomisk, and that is just so satisfying to me, because of all the shit that she has caused. My boy Kanti comes back to life fully in episode 6. It looks like he's gone forever there for a moment, but luckily he survives. And he saves Hidomi from certain doom. And Haruko even recognizes Kanti. I really hope Kanti returns in every Fooly Cooly series, just like Haruko does. Besides Haruko, he's the mascot of Fooly Cooly. At one point, Haruko says, "You're like a child throwing a tantrum to Hidomi." Like, she's 14? She's barely out of childhood. I think we can forgive some immaturity. Doesn't really matter though, as we get to see Hidomi turn into her mecha form, and it is sick. Though 2 girls, 1 robot makes for a very strange scene, but this episode is just full of strange imagery. Like, just what is Aiko? She's the daughter of the red-haired guy, but can also turn into a radio tower and then like later a plant? Is she a real girl, a robot, or what? And my final note for episode 6? Jinyu makes a return. Hell yeah. I think the hate that Fooly Cooly Progressive gets is a bit harsh. I do think it stands on its own. Like, you can probably watch this without watching any other Fooly Cooly series, but don't do yourself the disservice of missing out on the original Fooly Cooly. I truly do think it should be required viewing for any anime fan that wants to venture outside of shonen stuff. One big question I think a lot of people have is, does this feel like Fooly Cooly? And I think the answer is no. There's some recurring visuals from the original series like Haruko, Kanti, and the iron-shaped factories, but it never truly feels like Fooly Cooly, even with the pillows playing every so often. It's hard to explain what the original Fooly Cooly had that Progressive and Alternative don't have, but I think my answer is this, even if it feels like a cop-out. Heart. Fooly Cooly was meant to be a one-time deal, so everyone put their all into 6 episodes to tell a story. Progressive feels like a committee tried to brainstorm what people liked about Fooly Cooly without really knowing what people liked about it. The absence of Kazuya Tsurumaki and Yoji Inokido, the director and writer of the original Fooly Cooly, is felt. The animation is pretty standard most of the time, but does have some standout moments like in episode 4 and the art style in episode 5. Pacing is a bit all over the place, but that's an issue I have with the original Fooly Cooly as well, so I'm not really gonna fault Progressive for that. Whenever the Pillows starts playing, Progressive feels a lot more like Fooly Cooly, but when the Pillows aren't playing, the music just reverts to generic rock riffs and feels pretty boring. I think the original Fully Cooley benefits from being watched in one sitting, but Progressive is a bit harder for me to say that for. I think 2 or 3 viewing sessions is probably the best way to watch it, so you don't feel burnt out on it, which I understand is a tad harsh to recommend for a 6-episode series. Overall, I do think that they stuck the landing. I still don't understand everything 100%, but I had a good time and understood enough off the story beats. It is a bit rough around the edges and just had the misfortune of following, in my opinion, one of the best anime of all time. If I had to give a rating, I'd probably give it a 7.5 out of 10. A follow-up to Fully Cooley could have been a lot worse. Hopefully, Fully Cooley grunge and shoegaze aren't going to be the a lot worse thing that I'm talking about. I'll have this video out before Fully Cooley grunge comes out, and hopefully I can have my video on Fully Cooley alternative out before Fully Cooley shoegaze comes out. Just depends on when I get my PC back from being repaired. My name is Kurt, you've been watching Anime Basic, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.